Outside the car, the light was slowly getting dark as the family returned home after a long day. Jake drove through the familiar streets of suburban Austin, with Emily dozing in the passenger's seat next to him. In the back seat, their 9-year-old daughter Ella, tired from softball practice, was humming softly to herself. There was soft music playing in the salon. Jake glanced briefly at his wife. Emily looked thoughtful. The day had been ordinary work, then a family dinner in a small cafe and Ella's training. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. Jake felt the usual fatigue, mixed with quiet satisfaction from the evening spent with his family. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the distinctive sound of an incoming message, a loud electronic ping. The car was equipped with Apple CarPlay, and Emily's phone automatically connected to the onboard system. A notification popped up on the multimedia screen. Following it, Siri's monotonous voice announced in English, "Message from Ryan. I can't stop thinking about last night." The electronic voice began to say, "Stop," Emily suddenly exclaimed sharply, hastily reaching for the display, trying to turn off the voice message. The notification siren immediately fell silent, and only the following appeared on the phone screen. One new messagia tense silence fell over the cabin. Jake's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his eyes briefly shifting from the road to his wife. His heart skipped a beat. Ryan. The only Ryan he knew was Ella's softball coach, a young man who had been working with the kids' team for the last few months. Why would he be texting Emily late at night? And what did that last night mean? Jake felt a slow heaviness rise in his chest, and his insides felt cold. Ella looked up from her coloring book behind her at the familiar name. "Mom, did our coach Ryan write this?" she asked with childish spontaneity. Yes, honey," Emily quickly replied, without turning to her daughter. "He probably sent the schedule for the next game," she added hesitantly, and then pressed the button on the screen to hide the notification. Jake was silent, trying to keep his eyes on the road. He felt his palms growing sweaty on the steering wheel. The voice assistant's words played in his mind. "I can't stop thinking about last night." These phrases clearly did not apply to children's sports. He glanced furtively at Emily. She sat tensely, her face pale, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Yes, she, too, understood what had happened, and she understood that he had heard these words. "What did he write, Mom?" Ella persisted, leaning forward. "About nights? Was there a game tonight?" "Nothing important, honey," Emily said, trying to sound casual. "Coach just texts the parents late sometimes. Nothing special." Ella frowned, but nodded and leaned back in her seat, engrossed in her coloring. Jake could feel his heart beating faster. Questions swarmed through his head. Why was Ryan texting his wife? What the last night he mentioned? His imagination was already drawing disturbing pictures, but he tried to drive them away, striving to remain calm. No one spoke for the rest of the drive. The music still played softly in the background, but the atmosphere in the car had noticeably changed. The lightness and coziness of the evening had evaporated, giving way to a tense silence. Emily looked out the window, avoiding her husband's gaze. Jake continued to drive mechanically, although his mind was elsewhere. When they finally pulled up to the house, Ella had already dozed off in the back seat. Jake carefully slowed down near their garage and turned off the engine. Silence. Emily unbuckled her belt first and turned to her daughter. She fell asleep. "The poor thing is tired," she whispered, trying to hide the trembling in her voice. "I'll take it," Jake answered just as quietly. He got out of the car and carefully took Ella out, trying not to wake her. The girl fidgeted in his arms, buried her nose in his shoulder, and continued sleeping. Emily opened the door of the house and walked ahead, lighting the way to Ella's bedroom. Jake put his daughter to bed, carefully covered her with a blanket, and kissed her warm forehead. Ella muttered something quietly in her sleep and smiled. The tension was back in the air as the two of them left the room and closed the door behind them. Jake headed downstairs to the living room. Emily followed him, fiddling with her phone. He noticed that she had muted the sound and was glancing nervously at the darkened screen. "What was that, Emily?" Jake asked quietly, trying not to shout, as soon as they were alone. He stopped in the middle of the living room and turned to face his wife. Emily looked down. "Nothing," she muttered. "Probably a mistake, or not for me. I can't stop thinking about last night. Is the message I heard," he said tensely, trying to stay calm. Inside, everything was boiling, but his daughter was sleeping next to him, and he didn't want to make a scene. "I don't know why he wrote that," Emily said quietly, not looking up. "Maybe he got the wrong person, or it's a misunderstanding, Jake." He looked at her, barely containing his disappointment and nascent anger. He had never caught her in a lie before, but now every word his wife said rang false. Jake took a deep breath. "I hope so," was all he said, turning around and heading for the stairs. "We need to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." Emily wanted to add something, but she remained silent. She just nodded and, with her head down, followed him upstairs. That night, Jake tossed and turned in bed for a long time, glancing at his wife, who was sleeping with her back to him on the very edge of the bed. The suspicion was already making itself felt barely noticeable, but very disturbing. Jake felt that if this was not a misunderstanding, hard times lay ahead. It was a busy Saturday afternoon at the town sports field. It was another game of the Little League softball, and Ella's team was competing against a neighboring school. Jake, usually busy with housework or errands on the weekends, decided to go to the game with his family. After the recent incident in the car, he felt the need to be there and watch. He sat on a folding chair near the stands, next to other parents, and watched the girls in uniform run around the field. The sun was hot in Texas, but a light breeze helped ease the heat. Ella stood at second base, wearing a baseball cap and glove, waiting intently for the throw. Jake smiled at her daughter, who looked so serious and responsible. When the bat cracked, the ball flew high into the sky. Ella lunged for the fly ball and caught it, causing a wave of applause. Jake jumped up. "Well done, Ellie. Excellent," he shouted, proudly watching his daughter waving happily at him from the field. The parents sitting nearby congratulated each other. Someone patted Jake on the shoulder. "Your girl is just great," smiled the mother of one of Ella's teammates. "Thank you," Jake replied, beaming with pride. For a moment, he was distracted from his dark thoughts, completely immersed in the experience of the game. Emily was closer to the bench with the other volunteer moms, helping to hand out water and adjust the kids' uniforms. The team's coach, Ryan, walked up and down the field, giving encouragement and directions. Between innings, Jake would notice Emily and Ryan exchanging a few words. From a distance, he would see Emily laughing at something the coach said. Ryan would lean in, whispering something in her ear as the crowd roared. Emily would smile back. It was a smile that pricked Jake. He hadn't seen her look so relaxed and happy around him in a long time. When the game ended with Ella's team winning, parents and children came out onto the field to congratulate each other. Ella ran to her mother, and Emily, laughing, scooped up her daughter. Jake walked a little further away, continuing to watch. Ryan approached the group of parents, shaking hands gratefully. When it was Jake's turn, he shook the coach's hand firmly. "Great game. Thanks for doing so much for the girls," Jake said, looking Ryan straight in the eye. He tried to detect any hint of awkwardness or guilt on the young coach's face. "Thank you. Ella was one of the best today. You can be proud of her," Ryan replied amiably. His face expressed only open cordiality. His gaze was calm. If he felt anything when meeting Emily's husband, he skillfully hid it. Ryan let go of Jake's hand and turned his gaze to Emily, who had just come closer, holding her daughter's hand. "Emily, thanks for helping with the water and the organization. You are an amazing supporter of the team," he told her with a warm smile. "You're welcome, Ryan. I'm the team mom. That's my job," Emily joked, seeming a little embarrassed under her husband's gaze. "The main thing is that the girls are happy." Jake watched the brief scene, taking in every detail. Ryan stood next to Emily, a little closer than a simple conversation between a coach and a parent would require. Emily's eyes still sparkled with laughter as she looked at the coach. They looked too casual around each other. Jake felt a heaviness in his soul. Although no obvious violations of boundaries had occurred, He clearly sensed that there was something between them that was invisible to others, but understandable to him. "Dad, did you see me catch the ball?" Ella interrupted his thoughts happily, bouncing up and down with excitement. Jake blinked and leaned toward his daughter, forcing a smile. "Of course I did, Princess. You're the hero of the match today." He put his arm around her, pulling her closer. "I'm proud of you." Ella beamed at the praise and wrapped her arms tightly around her father's waist. Emily stood nearby, glancing between her husband and the coach, who had already switched to talking to the other parents. For a few moments, the family simply stood together amid the bustle of the celebrating team. "We have to go, Ellie," Emily said finally. "Let's go buy you some ice cream to celebrate your victory." Ella jumped up and down happily. "Hooray, ice cream." Jake, continuing to hug his daughter, looked at his wife. "You go to the car, Ella, and I will catch up with you in a minute," he said calmly. Emily nodded and headed for the parking lot, holding the duffel bag containing Ella's gear. Jake lingered, watching Ryan say goodbye to the others. The coach glanced after them one more time, or did he just imagine it, and then turned away. Jake walked silently to the car, holding his daughter's excited hand. Ella was chattering about her success and how the coach had praised the entire team. She was happy, and Jake tried his best to play along with her joy, but inside, he was growing anxious and jealous. The image of Emily laughing next to Ryan was stuck in his mind. The text from yesterday echoed in his mind. Now he saw with his own eyes that special smile his wife gave to a stranger. That evening, when Ella, having walked around and enjoyed her victory, went to bed, Jake and Emily met in the kitchen. He didn't intend to openly accuse her, but he couldn't help himself. "You've been around Ryan all day today," he began, trying to keep his voice neutral, even as his fingers tapped nervously on the tabletop. "You seem to be getting along well?" Emily, who was wiping up sticky lemonade stains on the table, froze for a moment. "What? No. We were just discussing the game and the kids," she shrugged, not looking up. "I help with the team, you know." "I know," Jake nodded, narrowing his eyes. "But it looked like you were having a lot of fun together." Emily straightened up and looked at her husband wearily. "Jake, please. You're not jealous of the coach, are you? It's just, I don't know, work stuff." He was joking around to lighten the mood. All the parents were laughing and joking. Jake chuckled, although it wasn't very funny. "Really? I think you laughed the loudest." "Stop it," Emily said more firmly. "Don't look for problems where there aren't any. I'm tired. Let's not talk about this again." She turned, signaling that the conversation was over, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. He clenched his fists. His suspicions only grew stronger. If yesterday he could still convince himself that the message was an absurd coincidence, now, seeing his wife communicate with Ryan in real life, Jake almost had no doubt. There was something between them. The only question was how far it had gone and how long it had been going on. Late in the evening, when the house was already plunged into silence, Jake quietly went down to the study. Emily and Ella were sleeping peacefully in the bedroom upstairs at least. He wanted to believe that they were sleeping. He himself, after the events of the last few days, could not close his eyes. Suspicions tormented him, giving him no peace. He decided to act cold-bloodedly, to collect the facts. If Emily really was cheating on him, then there should be traces. Invisible at first glance, but a careful analysis could reveal them. Jake turned on the desk lamp, opened his laptop, and logged into his online bank. Joint finances were an area where spouses usually had no secrets from each other. He remembered one piece of advice he had once heard. Unfaithful wives and husbands often give themselves away through their spending. Jake had never made a point of checking the accounts. They weren't in the habit of monitoring each other's every financial move. But that had changed. Opening his latest credit card statements, he began scanning the list of transactions for the past months. Most of the items were familiar: supermarket, utility bills, household purchases, clothing stores for Ella, the usual family expenses he recognized. But after a few minutes, his eye caught something out of place. The line from 2 weeks ago showed the transaction: Auto Lakeside Resort $250. Jake frowned. Lakeside Resort was a small hotel by the lake popular with couples. He knew for a fact that he had been in Dallas that day on business for a conference, and Emily had said she was staying home with Ella. $250 sounded like a one-night stay at this hotel. Jake's heart sank. Why was his credit card being used to pay for a hotel he had never stayed at? He tried to remember that day. They had called each other that morning. Emily had said she would stay home all day, maybe invite a friend over or watch a movie. None of it had seemed strange then. Now, that line on his statement changed everything. He leafed through the statement further. Another suspicious entry, Restaurant Bella not $89, dated a week ago. That evening, Jake recalled, Emily had said she was meeting a friend for dinner. The bill was $89, a typical bill for a dinner for two at an Italian restaurant, a very romantic place to meet a friend. Moreover, Emily usually paid for her get-togethers with her friends with her personal card. They were not in the habit of using the family account for personal entertainment. Jake remembered that evening clearly. He had come home late from work, and Emily had said she had spent it with her friend Lisa at some Italian restaurant. He hadn't suspected anything at the time. After all, her friend had invited her. Now it was obvious that Lisa had not been with her. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Each new line seemed to scream about his wife's hidden life. There was a large gas bill in the middle of the day when Emily said she was supposed to be at work at a gas station across town by the lake. There was a jewelry bill for $120. He hadn't given her anything in the last month, and she rarely bought jewelry. He carefully wrote these points down on a piece of paper, trying to piece together the puzzle. Lakeside Resort, a hotel by the lake. The Bella Knot restaurant, one of those places where couples like to dine, gasoline in the lake area. All the clues pointed in one direction to a certain place and a specific person. The lake was located near a park where Ella's team periodically trained. Ryan. Jake's knuckles turned white as he gripped his pen. The picture was almost complete. While he was away, Emily had probably taken the day off and spent the night with Ryan at a lakeside hotel. Another time, she had met him at a restaurant, lying about her friend. Was the jewelry store a gift for him or from him? His thoughts were tormenting him, but now he had not only guesses, but also tangible evidence. Jake sat in the quiet of his office for a few minutes, trying to cope with the wave of rage and pain that had washed over him. He felt betrayed and humiliated. On his own computer, the dry numbers and lines betrayed him. Taking a few deep breaths, he forced himself to calm down. Now was not the time to give away his suspicions prematurely. If Emily was indeed lying and cheating, he needed to be completely sure and prepared. He carefully saved copies of the bank statements to a flash drive and printed out pages with suspicious transactions for good measure. He hid the papers in a drawer under a folder with the house documents. He wedged the flash drive between books on a shelf. Jake acted cautiously, as if he were conducting an investigation at work. He needed proof before he could have a frank conversation. He turned off his laptop and leaned back in his chair, tired. The evidence of financial infidelity lay before him. But as a pragmatic man, Jake knew that perhaps something more substantial would be needed: direct confirmation. The words of the message, the smiles, the receipts all pointed in one direction, but he still cherished a tiny hope that an innocent explanation would be found. Deep down, he already knew the truth, but he was one step away from finally admitting the reality. And Jake decided that he would take that step. He would find out the truth for sure, at any cost. For several days, Jake was not himself, continuing to observe and collect information. Emily tried to behave as usual, but her detachment was noticeable. Jake noted that she spent most of her time on the phone, going to talk on her cell phone in another room. One evening, citing business, she left the house for a couple of hours, leaving Jake with Ella. Emily returned agitated about something, although she tried to hide it. All these little things only fueled Jake's determination to get to the truth. Late that evening, after making sure his wife and daughter were asleep, he decided to check another possible source of evidence: a surveillance camera. Their house had a modern video doorbell with a motion sensor installed near the front door. The device automatically recorded short videos every time someone approached the door. Jake rarely looked at these recordings. Usually there was nothing interesting, couriers and neighbors. But now he hoped to see something different. He opened the video call app on his phone and scrolled through the list of events to the suspicious dates. He remembered that the morning after his business trip, when the hotel was paid for according to the checkout, he returned only in the evening. What if Emily had brought Ryan to their home that morning while he was gone? Jake found the camera footage from that morning and pressed play. A picture appeared on the phone screen, the porch of their house in the gray tones of a night shot. The time was 7:20 and the door opened slightly, revealing Emily's silhouette in a robe. A man was standing on the porch. Jake brought the phone closer to his eyes. Yes, there was no doubt about it, it was Ryan. Jake's heart began to pound so hard that it seemed to deafen him. He watched, without looking away. In the video, Emily looked around, then stepped forward and quickly kissed Ryan on the lips. Yes, she kissed him, although the camera captured it from a distance, but the gesture was quite legible. Then she invited him inside. The man disappeared into the house, the door closed. Jake paused the recording, his fingers shaking. His throat was dry. He sat still for a few seconds, gathering his courage before pressing the next record. The next alarm was 9:45 and that same day. Video. The door to their house opened, revealing Emily and Ryan. Emily was dressed, smiling happily, her hair slightly disheveled. Ryan stepped out first, turning to face her. They hugged goodbye, then kissed again, this time longer. Then Ryan stormed off the porch and headed toward his car. Parked outside his face was not clearly visible, but his figure and gait were recognizable. Emily watched him go for a moment, then clutched her hands to her chest and quietly closed the door. The recording ended. Jake stared at the dark screen of his phone for a long moment, unable to move. There she was, his wife, kissing another man outside their home, the home where their daughter slept, the home he considered sacred to their family. He was filled with rage and pain. There was no longer any doubt. He hadn't just imagined or misinterpreted the signs, he had the facts before his eyes. The silent video was irrefutable proof. Emily was cheating on him. Jake stood up, feeling his legs buckle. He staggered to the couch, sank down, and covered his face with his hands. He wanted to scream, to break something, but in the silence of the sleeping house, all he could do was shake silently with the sobs that were rolling in. For the first time in a long time, his eyes filled with tears. He had loved Emily, or at least the one she used to be, and he thought they were happy. And now that world had collapsed. The image of his wife joyfully kissing another man stood before him, making everything inside him turn to stone. After about 10 minutes, he managed to pull himself together. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve and took a few deep breaths. Now was not the time to fall apart. There was a conversation ahead, possibly the most difficult in his life. But first, Jake decided to save the evidence. He downloaded the videos from the cloud storage to his phone and then transferred them to the same flash drive where the statements and scans of the accounts were already stored. He hid the flash drive again. Now he had everything he needed to show his wife irrefutable evidence. The night was approaching dawn. Jake was unable to fall asleep until the morning. He greeted the dawn sitting in the living room with a cup of black coffee, trying to stop the trembling in his hands. Soon the family on the second floor began to stir and wake up. Emily, as if nothing had happened, went down to make breakfast, throwing her husband the usual. "Good morning, how did you sleep?" Her voice sounded even, as if there was no storm brewing between them. Jake looked at his wife over the steaming cup. The anger inside him was still there, but he forced himself to answer calmly. "Fine," he said, and then immediately turned away, fearing that she might be able to read something from his gaze. At that moment, he already knew for sure. He couldn't remain silent any longer. Today, he would expose her, no matter what it cost him. By midday, Jake's nerves were on edge. Things weren't going well at work. His thoughts were turning back to home, to the storm he had to stir up. Around midday, he realized he couldn't wait any longer. Right at his desk, phone in hand, he dialed Emily's number. Beep. Second. Third. Finally, The voice of the wife was heard on the other end. "Hey, Jake, is something wrong?" Emily seemed slightly surprised by her husband's sudden call in the middle of the day. Jake was silent for a few seconds, collecting his thoughts. Then he exhaled hoarsely. "Yes, it happened. We need to talk." There was a pause on the line, then a wary answer. "Okay, about what? You're acting weird. Are you okay?" Jake felt the anger rising inside him again, but he held it in, trying to keep his voice level, even though his voice was treacherous. "Tell me, what's going on, Emily, between you and Ryan?" The coach's name hung in the air, and in the silence that followed his question, Jake distinctly heard Emily inhale sharply. There was no answer, just muffled breathing. "Did you hear me?" he repeated, more harshly. "What's up with you and Coach Ryan? Are you cheating on me with him? Yes or no? I want the truth." "Jake," Emily's voice trembled. "Please, not on the phone. Let's discuss this at home, please." "No, answer me now," Jake cut her off. "I want to hear it from you. Out loud. Are you cheating on me with him?" In the silence that followed, he could almost feel Emily struggling to find the words. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I, I didn't mean to. It's complicated." Jake clenched his teeth so hard his cheekbones ached. Tears of anger welled up in his eyes, but he kept pushing. "Tell, yes or no." There was a sob on the other end, and then, almost in a whisper, came, "Yes." Jake's vision blurred, even though he had been prepared for this answer. His heart sank painfully. For a few seconds, he was speechless. Emily spoke again first, a little louder, through her tears. "I'll explain. Please, it's not what you think. Let's talk in the evening, without Ella." Jake tried to swallow the lump in his throat. "Okay," he said briefly. "In the evening. In the backyard." He hung up without waiting for an answer. For a few seconds, Jake sat motionless at his office desk, clutching the phone tightly. His ears were ringing, his heart was pounding. He had just heard with his own ears the confirmation of what had ruined his life. Emily's final words, that short yes, were deafening. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He stood up, out of his mind, and walked out into the hallway. His colleagues were asking him something as they passed, but Jake didn't hear them. He needed some fresh air. He made his way to the toilet and splashed cold water on his face. In the mirror, a pale face looked back at him, as if it had aged 10 years. There were tears in his eyes, but he clenched his teeth, not letting them spill. Now was not the time. He wiped his face with a paper towel and made a decision. Tonight, he and Emily would dot all the I's and cross all the T's. The most painful and important 3 minutes of his life were over. It was all over. Now all that was left was to hear her explanation and decide what to do next. The house seemed unusually quiet that evening. There was little conversation over dinner, with Ella chattering cheerfully about school and his parents exchanging only forced smiles and nods. Jake counted the minutes until he could be alone with Emily. A plan was hatched. Talk in the backyard, out of his daughter's ears. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, after putting Ella to bed with a book in her room, Jake came downstairs. Emily was already waiting at the glass door leading to the garden. She was mechanically fiddling with the hem of her sweater sleeve. Seeing her husband, she asked nervously, "Did Ella fall asleep?" "He's reading and will soon fall asleep," Jake answered briefly. He pressed the switch, turning off the lights in the kitchen, and opened the door to the yard. "Let's go." Emily walked past him, head down, and out into the street. The evening air was warm and damp. Insects chirped softly in the gathering darkness, and a neighbor's dog barked in the distance. Jake closed the door and took a few steps onto the wooden deck. Emily paused at the railing, hugging herself as if she were cold. They were silent for a few long seconds. Jake spoke first, his voice hoarse. "Well, I'm listening." Emily jumped at the silence his voice broke. She turned to him, her face pale. In the light of the lantern coming through the living room window, he could see the glitter of tears on her eyelashes. She opened her mouth to speak, but at first she only sighed heavily. Finally, gathering her courage, she said, I'm sorry. Please. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry, Jake. Jake's heart sank painfully at these words. He ran his hand over his face. Sorry, he repeated bitterly. You're sorry. Do you understand what you've done? How could you? His voice trembled, and he fell silent, afraid of breaking into a scream. Emily covered her face with her hands. A muffled voice came through her fingers. I didn't mean to lie to you. I'm confused. Everything got out of control. Jake took a step closer, holding back his anger. Tell me everything, he said quietly but clearly. How long has this been going on? How far has it gone? Emily lowered her hands, wiping the tears from her cheeks. She looked at her husband pleadingly. Do you really want to hear the details? It started a few months ago. I didn't plan anything like that, honestly. It's just, we talked a lot during training, then had coffee a couple of times after class, talked about life. I thought it was just friendship. Friendship, Jake chuckled bitterly. Go on. Emily swallowed hard. It seemed as if each word was an effort. Then there was the team training before the tournament. Remember, at the beginning of the summer, I helped with the organization. That's when it all happened for the first time. After training, we were alone, talking. Then he kissed me. I didn't push him away. She began to sob again, hanging her head. I don't know what came over me, Jake. I felt so good from his attention, as if I were a young girl again. And at home, we were always talking about business, about Ella. I felt that I was interesting to someone again, desired. And you slept with him, Jake finished for her in an icy tone. Emily nodded, crying. Yes, it happened then, and a couple more times after that. I didn't mean to do it again, I swear, but I couldn't stop. He told me he loved me, that I was special, and I was a fool. I thought I could control everything, but it only made things worse. Every time after I met him, I felt terrible. I wanted to tell you everything, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, afraid of ruining our family. She spoke haltingly, choking on tears. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Jake listened, clenching his teeth until they hurt. His heart was torn between rage and a numbing pain. He imagined them together, and the images burned into his eyes. Memories formed in his head, how happy they had been in years past. Him, so young, holding Ella as a newborn in the hospital, Emily, tired but happy, smiling at him with tears of joy. The three of them on the beach the summer before last, building a sandcastle. Now all these memories brought him pain, not joy. Do you love him? He suddenly asked sharply, not expecting this question from himself. He needed to know what was lost forever. Emily shook her head. No, I don't know myself. It seemed to me that yes, in moments of infatuation, but it was an illusion, passion. I never stopped loving you, Jake. She took a step towards him, looking pleadingly. You are the father of my daughter, my husband. I am stupid, unhappy. I ruined everything, but my love for you has not gone anywhere. It's just that at some point I thought that you didn't love me anymore. You are always busy, tired. And then he appeared, listened, admired. But now I understand that it was all untrue. My present was only with you. Forgive me, please. Emily reached out her hand, trying to touch Jake, but he recoiled as if from a blow. Don't you dare, he said quietly, his voice strained. Not now. I can't even look at you. God, Emily. He closed his eyes, trying to control the hysteria that was building. How did you imagine all this? Did you think I'd never find out? Or would you have been content to live on two fronts? What would have happened next? Did you want to go to him? No, Emily jumped up, her eyes wide with horror. No, I never thought of leaving you and Ella. It was a crazy mistake. My mistake. All these months I lived as if I had lost myself, torn between my feelings for you and what I was doing. Every day I wanted to stop everything, but I didn't have the strength. And then today, when you called, I realized that I couldn't go on like this. Deep down, I probably waited for everything to be revealed. I myself couldn't live like this anymore. She began to sob again, lowering her face. I have never regretted anything in my life as much as I regret this affair. If only I could go back to everything. Jake was silent. Her words did not make him feel better. He felt empty. The happy years of the past now seemed like a lie. But the worst thing was that their little daughter, unsuspecting, was playing in her room today while her parents discussed such terrible things. He imagined how it would hit her. And suddenly he felt a sharp contempt not only for his wife, but for himself. After all, he was also responsible for their relationship. Maybe he had been too distant, bogged down in work. But no, the betrayal was her decision, conscious or not, and there was no excuse for it. "What now?" he finally asked dryly. "What do you want, Emily? For me to forgive and forget? That won't work. You've broken our trust." Emily sobbed, trying to pull herself together. I, I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to try to fix everything, if it's possible. For us. For our family, for Ella. I'm ready to do anything. Break up with him once, and for all I already did it, he knows. I told him not to look for me anymore. I can quit my job, change my number, go to a psychologist, go to church, anything. If only you would give me a chance. At least some chance to atone for my guilt. Jake listened to this plea in silence. A part of him wanted to believe that maybe all was not lost, especially when it came to his daughter. But the pain and anger were too strong for now. "I don't know," he said dully. "I don't know, Emily. It's all too fresh. You broke something between us, and I'm not sure it can be fixed." Emily covered her face with her hands and slowly sank down onto the garden bench, her shoulders shaking. Jake looked at her for a moment, still feeling the storm inside. Memories flashed through his head, now bringing only pain. He rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. "I think we should see a family psychologist," he finally said slowly, surprised by these words. Emily looked up with tear-stained eyes. Jake continued, "If we're going to try to fix something, we need outside help. We'll just completely ruin everything. We should at least try to figure out what to do next in a civilized manner for Ella's sake." Emily nodded several times, wiping away her tears. "Yes, yes, of course. I agree. I wanted to suggest it myself. Thank you," she whispered. They sat in wary silence for a moment longer. Finally, Jake said, "We'd better go inside. It's late. Maybe Ella is looking for us." Emily looked at her husband helplessly. Where are you going to sleep tonight?" Jake looked down. "In the guest room," he answered dryly. He couldn't bear the thought of sleeping with her that night. Emily, still hugging herself, nodded. "Understand." He walked silently toward the house. Emily followed, sobbing softly. Before going inside, Jake paused for a moment, looking up at the dark sky. It felt like he was watching a tragedy happen to someone else. But this was his life. And what it would look like tomorrow, next week, next year, he had no idea. The day after the tough conversation in the backyard, the atmosphere in the house was oppressive. Jake avoided unnecessary words. Emily walked around the house like a quiet shadow. They barely exchanged a word at breakfast, trying to act normal for Ella's sake. The girl felt the tension and looked questioningly at her mother, and then at her father, but did not ask anything. Later that evening, while Ella was doing her homework in her room, Jake and Emily found themselves alone in the kitchen. He was silently washing the dishes. She was trying to read a magazine, her eyes unfocused. Suddenly, her phone, lying on the table, rang. They both jumped. Emily looked at the screen, and her face contorted with alarm. The name Ryan appeared on the display. Jake wiped his hands on a towel and stepped closer. He asked quietly, although everything was clear. Emily nodded, pressing the end button with a shaking hand. The call ended. "He's been writing all day. I haven't answered," she whispered. "He probably doesn't understand, or he's worried that I've disappeared." She had barely finished speaking when the phone rang again. The same incoming call. Jake clenched his jaw. "Give it here," he demanded. Emily looked at her husband with fear. "Please, no. I'll do it myself." But Jake had already grabbed the phone from the table. The answer button was blinking on the screen. He pressed it and immediately switched to speakerphone. Hello? Jake's voice was even, but there was anger vibrating in it. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then a slightly embarrassed male voice was heard. Uh, Emily? Hi, it's Ryan. It's not Emily, Jake snapped. It's her husband. There was a dead silence on the line. Jake imagined Ryan's shock. He felt a grim satisfaction. Emily let out a quiet sob somewhere behind her, covering her mouth with her hand. Finally, Ryan's hoarse voice came over the speaker. Jake, look, Listen, Jake interrupted harshly. I know everything. I saw everything. He didn't hold back the contempt in his voice. Ryan fell silent on the other end of the line. Jake continued. It's all over between you and my wife. Do you understand me? Don't you dare call her, write to her, or even get close to my family. If you try to get in touch again, you'll regret it. I'm so sorry, Ryan finally spoke quickly. Believe me, I didn't mean to hurt you. We didn't mean it that way, really. Jake snorted contemptuously. You didn't want to. It's too late to think about that. You broke someone else's family. I hope it was worth it. Now, do you hear me? Get out of our lives. Otherwise, everyone will find out, both your superiors in the league and the parents of the children. It won't be difficult for me to show everyone who you are. Ryan tried to get a word in edgewise. Listen, between us, it was mutual. I'm not some kind of. There were a few apologetic notes in his tone. I'm not going to listen to you, Jake snapped. You've said everything you wanted to say. Now remember what I said, and get the hell out. He pressed the red end call button so hard the screen almost cracked. Jake stood there for a few seconds, breathing heavily, clenching his fist. He handed the phone back to Emily. She was whiter than snow, her hand pressed to her mouth. He won't bother you anymore, Jake said quietly. Emily nodded frantically, taking the phone with trembling fingers. Like footsteps were heard in the hallway, Ella came out worried at the sound of the voice. Mom? Dad? What happened? Jake whirled around. For a moment, he was afraid his daughter had heard the conversation, but she looked more puzzled than scared. Emily was the first to rush to Ella. It's okay, honey, she said softly, hugging the girl. Daddy was just talking loudly on the phone, don't worry. Ella looked over her mother's shoulder at her father. Jake forced himself to smile as calmly as he could. Yes, Princess. Sorry for disturbing you. Everything is fine. The daughter studied their faces for another second, then nodded. Okay, I'm almost done with my homework, she said, still looking at her parents suspiciously. Good girl, Jake praised and patted her on the head. Go, I'll come check on you soon. When Ella disappeared, Jake and Emily exchanged glances. There was a shared anxiety in their gazes. They both knew that they wouldn't be able to hide the tension from the child for long. But Ella didn't really know anything yet. Thank you, Emily said barely audibly, lowering her eyes. Jake said nothing. He was still seething with anger, but he also felt a strange sense of relief. At least that part of the nightmare was over. Ryan was out of their way, at least directly. There were other consequences to deal with. By Friday, the passions had died down a bit, but the tension was still there. Emily tried to make an appointment with a family psychologist. An appointment was scheduled for the following week. Jake lived as if on autopilot, communicating with his wife only on domestic issues and paying maximum attention to Ella, who increasingly sensed something was wrong. On Friday afternoon, when Emily picked Ella up for an unscheduled workout, the girl was eager to work out. No matter what, Jake got a text on his phone. The sender was an unfamiliar number, but the beginning of the text gave away the author. It was Ryan. He begged to meet face to face, asked to listen, and give him a chance to apologize. At first, Jake wanted to ignore it, but then he felt the end was not done. He himself, oddly enough, wanted to look this man in the eye, the one who destroyed his family, and perhaps finally pour out all his pain not through the phone, but in person. He answered briefly, Today, 7 p.m. Old Pier on Holness Lake. It was a quiet spot outside the city, on a lake that few people visited on weekdays. He and Emily had once fished there in the early years of their marriage. Now it seemed symbolic. There he would say goodbye to the past. As the sun began to set, Jake pulled up to the old wooden dock. There was no one around, just the water, tinted orange by the evening sky, and the rustling of the reeds. Ryan was already waiting, leaning his back against the railing of the dock. Hearing footsteps, he turned around. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. His face was tired, worried. Jake noticed dark circles under his eyes. It seemed these days had been hard on everyone involved. They just looked at each other in silence for a moment. Ryan spoke first. "Jake, thank you for coming. I wanted to tell you in person. I'm so sorry. I really am. My behavior was unacceptable. I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me, but—" "Stop it," Jake said coldly, stepping closer. "You wanted to meet me, so here I am, but not to hear your apologies. I don't care about your remorse." Ryan fell silent, looking down, confused. Jake came close to him. He could feel himself tense to the limit with rage and contempt. "Look at me," he demanded. The coach looked up, his gray eyes a mixture of shame and worry. Jake stared at him for a few seconds, then said almost in a whisper, "Why? What the hell, Ryan? Do you have a family yourself? A girlfriend? A wife? Do you even realize what you've done?" "I don't have anyone," Ryan answered quietly. "I'm alone. It's not an excuse, but I really loved Emily. I didn't mean for it to be like this. I'm sorry." He tried to touch Jake's shoulder with his hand, but Jake pulled away sharply. "Don't you dare say her name," Jake hissed, and before Ryan could pull his hand away, Jake grabbed him by the front of his shirt and shoved him against a dock post. The wood creaked loudly. Ryan gasped in surprise. Jake brought his face close to Ryan's, squeezing the fabric with his fist. "You fell in love?" His voice dripped with venomous mockery. "You call this love? You ruined my family's life, my daughter's. Because of you, now a 9-year-old child will grow up in a broken home. Where was your fucking love when you climbed into bed with a married woman?" Ryan, pinned against the pole, shook his head, gasping for breath. I'm guilty. And Emily is guilty too. We're both guilty. I'm sorry. I have nothing to say in my defense. I just lost my head." Jake let go of him in disgust and took a step back. Ryan straightened up, rubbing his bruised back, but made no attempt to defend himself or to strike back. It cooled Jake's ardor a little, seeing him so pathetic and scared. For a while, there was only the sound of the water splashing against the pilings. "I'm glad you understand," Jake finally said, breathing hard. "Because you're not going to be spared. I've already made sure you suffer some consequences. You don't have to coach our kids anymore. I've reached out to the league. They have a code. An affair with your protege's parent is more than enough grounds for your suspension, so you'll miss the next few games, and then you might even quit of your own free will." Ryan turned pale. You told them already?" he whispered. "I've told you enough," Jake lied, although in reality he was only threatening to reveal an ugly story to the organizers. Ryan had indeed been suspended for an investigation. Jake knew that even if the matter was hushed up, the coach's reputation had already been damaged. Rumors had spread among parents, and it was unlikely that anyone would want to see him on the field with their children in the future. Ryan covered his face with his hands. "Oh God," he managed to squeeze out. He stood there for a few seconds, then lowered his hands and looked at Jake pleadingly. "I understand. You won't hear from me again. I'll leave town if I have to. Just please don't ruin Emily's life any further, and Ella's. They're not guilty of anything." At these words, Jake almost rushed at him again. "Don't you dare say my daughter's name, you bastard," he said quietly, clenching his fists. "It's too late for you to think about her." Ryan hung his head. "I'm sorry. You're right. I said everything. And I really wish for you to be able to get through this. If it were possible to change everything, I would." He didn't finish, stumbling in mid-sentence. "Go away," Jake said dully, looking away at the dark, mirror-like water. "Before I throw you into this lake." Ryan hesitated only a moment. Then, swallowing nervously, he almost ran from the dock to the parking lot. Jake didn't turn around. He listened to the footsteps on the wood quickly recede, then fade away. Soon he heard the sound of a car starting in the distance and then died away. Jake was left alone with the still lake and the long shadows of the evening clouds. He stood there, staring ahead, unable to move. There was a frightening emptiness inside him. The surge of rage had passed, leaving only devastation in its wake. He took a deep breath and slowly crouched down at the very edge of the dock, clutching the old boards in his hands. Pictures came to mind, a young him and Emily sitting in this very spot, their legs dangling in the water, laughing. How long ago it was, like another life. A lump rose in his throat, and Jake realized that he could finally cry without looking back. In a place where no one could see, no one could hear, he allowed himself to let out everything that had been pent up. Quiet, heavy sobs burst from his chest. He did not know how much time passed, minutes or an hour, before the tears dried up. Jake stood up, wiped his face with the back of his hand. The evening air cooled his hot skin. He felt bitter, but a little better. Now he could go home to his daughter, for whom he would continue to try to live. A few days later, Jake and Emily sat side by side on a narrow leather couch in a marriage counselor's office. The warm light of the lamp, the neutral pastel colors of the walls, and Dr. Phillips's calm voice eased the tension a little, but the tension between the spouses was still acute. So, Dr. Phillips, a woman in her 50s with kind, intelligent eyes behind her glasses, began softly, "I thank you for coming together. I understand how difficult this is for you. Jake, Emily, our goal today is to talk honestly about what happened and figure out how you both see the future. No blaming, just listening to each other, okay?" Jake nodded, crossing his arms over his chest. Emily sat with her fingers clasped in her lap. They glanced at each other briefly, then looked straight ahead again. "Emily," the psychologist said, "do you want to get started? Tell me what you think is happening in your relationship right now." Emily raised her head slightly, her voice quiet and cracked. I made a terrible mistake. I cheated on my husband, and now because of it our family is on the verge of falling apart. I only blame myself, and I want to do everything to make amends, if possible." Her eyes filled with tears again. Dr. Phillips handed her a box of tissues. Emily gratefully took one and dabbed at her eyes. "Thank you, Emily, for your frankness," the psychologist nodded. "Jake, how would you describe what's happening?" Jake sighed, trying to find the words. "My wife betrayed me, betrayed our family. I thought we were fine, but it turns out." He shook his head. "It turns out I didn't notice. Now I'm angry, hurt, I feel betrayed, and I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to turn around and leave, to give up everything. Another part remembers how happy we were and thinks about our daughter. I'm just not sure I'll ever be able to trust Emily again. Without trust, there can be no marriage." Dr. Phillips inclined her head sympathetically. "Your feelings are completely understandable. Mistrust, anger, pain, all of these are normal reactions to betrayal. You have the right to experience them. The question is, do you both want to try to restore the relationship, or are you inclined to break up? This is a very serious decision, and I will only help you weigh it." Emily shook her head, sobbing. "I don't want a divorce. I love Jake. I'm willing to do anything to earn his trust back. If it takes 10 years to prove myself, I will. I don't care what people say. I have to try to keep this family together for us and for our daughter. She covered her face with her hand, unable to continue. Jake was silent, looking at the floor. Dr. Phillips addressed him softly. "And you, Jake? Do you want to save the marriage? Not promise to forgive, not now, but at least try. Or have you already firmly decided that you can't?" There was silence in the office. Several long moments passed before Jake spoke. "I don't know. Honestly, a week ago I couldn't even imagine such a situation. I loved my wife, I trusted her. Now," he stopped, catching his breath, "now everything is broken. It hurts me even to look at her and think what she did with." He hesitated. "Sorry." "It's okay," the psychologist said calmly. Continue if you can. I'm trying for my daughter. Jake continued quietly. Ella deserves to have a mom and dad, but I'm not sure I can live like nothing happened. I see this picture in my head every hour, every minute. There's no guarantee it'll go away. Dr. Phillips sneered. I understand. Restoring trust is a long and difficult path. Some couples take years to do this, and still the relationship will never be the same. It will become different. Sometimes stronger, sometimes, unfortunately, not. The most important thing is that you both must answer yourselves. Do you have enough love and desire to fight for the marriage after what happened? And you must answer honestly. If one will only do it out of a sense of duty, nothing will come of it. Sometimes it is better to part in a civilized manner than to live in constant pain. As sad as it is, but such a decision does not mean the end of the world. After all, your daughter will still love you both if you act wisely. The psychologist's words hung in the air. Emily shook her head. No, I don't want this. I believe that we can do it. Jake, please. She turned to her husband. Let's try. If after some time you realize that you can't, then we'll get a divorce. But it's worth giving it a chance, at least for Ella's sake. Jake met her gaze. There was such a pleading look in his wife's eyes that he couldn't help but look away. He didn't know what to say. Dr. Phillips decided to intervene. I don't think there's any need to make a final decision today. You're in a crisis. Let's agree on this. You give yourself, say, a month, go to therapy, try to establish communication. If after a month Jake understands that he can't, you'll go to divorce proceedings. If there's progress during this time, we'll continue working. How do you like that? It's not forever, it's an attempt. But only if both agree with it. Emily nodded vigorously. Yes, I agree. Jake, please. Jake ran his hand through his hair tiredly. Okay, he said quietly. A month, so a month. But I'm not promising anything. Nobody is asking for promises, the psychologist smiled. Only sincerity. If it becomes completely unbearable, you will tell me. Jake nodded. Emily wiped her eyes with a quiet sigh of relief. Dr. Phillips eased the tension a bit by moving on to more practical matters. She discussed with them how to behave around Ella, when and how to perhaps talk to her if a breakup became inevitable, and gave them their first homework: to find 15 minutes each night to talk calmly with each other, without accusations, even about a neutral subject, to rebuild communication. The couple listened with half an ear. Their emotional burnout was too great. They said goodbye to the therapist and left the office. They walked across the parking lot in the twilight in silence, holding a small folder with printouts of recommendations. There were no more sessions scheduled for the evening, and the doctor allowed them to leave a little early, noticing that they looked tired. Getting into the car, Jake fastened his seat belt and glanced briefly at Emily. She sat quietly, clutching the folder to her chest. Her face was exhausted, but there was a timid hope at the corners of her lips. Jake turned away and started the engine. He himself did not know what he was feeling. But the decision was made, a month of trying, and he would honestly try for his daughter. And then, whatever would happen, would happen. The agreed month was coming to an end. Despite his efforts and therapy, Jake felt that the wound was too deep. He honestly tried to talk to Emily. They did the psychologist's assignments together, but each time, left alone with his thoughts, he realized that he could not forget what had happened. Emily, seeing her husband's coldness, was fading away day by day, although she did everything possible to ease his pain. And so, without waiting for another session with the psychologist, Jake made a decision. He sat in the divorce lawyer's office, across from a short, balding, middle-aged man named Mr. Callahan, who was leafing through the folder Jake had brought. On the divider of the folder, written in black marker, was Autumn Lake, a name that only Jake would understand. Autumn Lake. That was the name he had given his file, because it was in the fall at the lake that the truth was fully revealed. Mr. Callahan cleared his throat and looked up. So, Mr. Hanson, the situation is clear. You want to file for divorce, citing your spouse's infidelity as the grounds, correct? Yes, Jake confirmed quietly. His heart sank. The word divorce still seemed unreal. The lawyer nodded, looking at one of the papers. You have more than enough evidence. Photos, statements, here's a video. He raised his eyebrows, examining the printed footage from the camera. Yes, this is more than enough for the court. True, technically the state of Texas allows for divorce without naming the guilty party, but your case may affect some aspects. For example, the division of property. The court may take into account that the spouse violated the marital obligations and award you a larger share. Jake gave a wry smile. I don't care about taking more money for myself. The main thing is my daughter. I'm not going to deprive Emily of parental rights or anything like that. She's a good mother, no matter what. Mr. Callahan nodded approvingly. That's a commendable attitude. In my experience, Texas courts rarely restrict one parent's rights unless there's a threat to the child. Cheating on a spouse is not the same as child abuse, and judges understand that. So unless your wife is an alcoholic, abusive, or abandoning the child, and I can see that's not the case, then joint custody will likely be awarded. Jake nodded. That suits me. We've already discussed with my wife. With Emily, he stumbled over the word wife, that Ella will live alternately with me and with her. We want to do what's best for the child, without scandals. Good. As for property, you have a house, the mortgage is almost paid off, 2 cars, savings. If the divorce is by agreement, you will most likely divide everything roughly in half. If we go through the court, you can demand compensation for part of the expenses that the wife spent on the affair. For example, if she paid for the hotel from the family money, the court can return this amount to you through the division of property. Jake waved it off. A couple $1,000s are not worth a war. I don't want to divulge the details in public, if possible peacefully. Emily, he sighed, she agrees to everything. She feels guilty. We already talked, she will not ask for any sponsorship or extra money. It is more important for her to maintain a normal relationship for the sake of the child. The lawyer smiled knowingly. Glad to hear it. Such mutual understanding saves a lot of nerves and money. In this case, we can formalize the so-called peaceful divorce by mutual consent, stating the reason irreconcilable differences, or if you consider it necessary, adultery as the basis. As a rule, in order not to disclose details in public once again, you cannot focus on the reason. But the presence of proven infidelity will be a trump card for us if suddenly the matter comes to disputes in court. How long will it take? Everything? Jake asked after a pause. Divorce. Callahan shrugged. The minimum term is 60 days from the date of filing the claim. This is the statutory waiting period. Most often, the process lasts from 3 to 6 months if there are no disputes. If there are disputes, it can drag on longer. But since you have already agreed on almost everything, I believe we will formalize everything in a few months. It will depend on the judge's workload. I understand, Jake nodded. A few months was nothing compared to their whole life, but they had a new year ahead of them, and they would probably not celebrate it as husband and wife. The thought of it was a dull ache, but he knew it couldn't be any other way. He and the lawyer discussed a few more details. During the process, Mr. Callahan asked, I see. What about alimony or spousal support? The lawyer glanced at the paperwork. In your state, they rarely award spousal support unless the wife can't support herself, and the marriage lasted more than 10 years. Emily works, she'll cope, Jake shook his head. Besides, she's not asking for anything like that. Most likely, she'll refuse any payments. She's not the vindictive type. Mr. Callahan noted this in the folder. Good. In that case, we'll probably do without the sponsorship requirements. All that's left is to formalize the division of property and guardianship. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Callahan slid a prepared statement of claim toward Jake to sign. Jake skimmed the dry lines. He, the plaintiff, sought a divorce from the defendant, Emily Hansen, on the grounds of adultery. The marriage was invalid and could not be saved. The legalese did little to convey the pain and drama behind those words. Jake's hand shook as he wrote his signature. That was it. The decision was official. In a few days, Emily would sign her consent, and the process would begin. As he put the papers away in the Autumn Lake folder, Jake felt both a weight and a strange relief. He had done everything he could. Now all that was left was to go all the way to the end of this path and try to preserve the most important things he had, his daughter's love and his own dignity. Immediately after meeting Ryan on the dock, Jake did not leave things to chance. The next day, he called the head of the youth league and hinted at the coach's unacceptable behavior. Without going into details, Jake reported that he had evidence of violations of the ethical code. The management responded seriously, assuring that the issue would be looked into as soon as possible. A couple of weeks later, the consequences for Ryan became known. The youth league management, apparently having received a signal from whom one could guess, conducted its own investigation. Officially, in a letter to parents, it was reported that Coach Ryan was temporarily suspended from his duties due to personal circumstances. Team training was suspended for a week until a replacement coach was found. The fall season effectively ended early. Jake, after reading the email, just silently handed the phone to Emily. She quickly ran her eyes over the text and covered her face with her hand. "It's my fault," she whispered. "Because of me, the children were left without a coach." "It's his own fault," Jake said dryly. It was hard to feel sorry for the man who had done so much, although the thought that other families had suffered indirectly was a little jarring. "They'll find someone else. Maybe it's for the best time for everyone to cool off." The news quickly spread among the parents. Emily tried not to appear in public unnecessarily. It seemed to her that everyone around her guessed the reason for what had happened. A couple of friends from among the mothers of Ella's classmates actually called with questions. "Listen, what happened there? Why did they remove our coach? They say there was some kind of scandal." "Emily, honestly, was he hitting on some mommy?" her friend asked over the phone. "You were the closest to the coach. What happened?" Emily could feel her friend's suspicions behind her back. Her palms were sweaty, her voice trembled, but she tried to speak calmly. "I have no idea, Sue. I was told myself that he had personal problems. Maybe family, or moving. I honestly don't know." "Really? It's strange." "Okay, see you later," the interlocutor said incredulously and hung up. After hanging up the phone, Emily sat in silence for a long time, feeling her cheeks burn with shame. She knew some people were probably suspicious, but no one was openly accusing her. At least not yet. Ella was initially upset when she learned that training was canceled. "Why? When is Coach Ryan coming back?" she asked her parents. "Coach Ryan's sick, honey," Emily lied, looking away. "I don't know if he'll be back, but they'll find you a new coach soon, I promise." Jake stood nearby, ready to take up the conversation if his wife lost it. But Ella seemed to believe him. She just shrugged. "It's a pity. He's a good coach. But never mind, let him get better." After that, the topic of the coach didn't come up much anymore. Winter was starting, the playing season was over, and Ella had new interests ahead. Ryan disappeared from their lives as quickly as he had appeared. By December, it was clear that living together under the same roof was no longer possible. After filing for divorce, Jake and Emily made the difficult decision to move out so as not to traumatize each other with their constant presence. Emily rented a small two-bedroom apartment in the same area so that Ella could continue to go to school. Jake kept the house until the final division of property was made. At least for now, it was more convenient for everyone. The day came when Emily's things were packed and the truck with her boxes was waiting at the front door. Before her mother left, her parents decided to have a frank talk with Ella. They chose a Friday night when they didn't have to get up early for school the next day. Ella sat on the couch between her mom and dad, feeling the tension. Jake mentally repeated the psychologist's advice. "Keep it simple, don't shift the blame, reassure the child of love." He looked at Emily. She gathered her courage and began first. "Aluchka, my darling, your dad and I need to tell you something. You've probably noticed that we've been sad lately and haven't been talking to each other much." She hesitated. Ella nodded seriously. "Yes, you always seem distant. I thought I did something wrong." or you were angry with me." "No, honey, no," Jake said quickly, putting his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "It's not your fault. What's happening is just between Mom and Dad. We love you more than anything in the world. Please remember that." Ella looked from her dad to her mom, her eyes sparkling. "Are you going to get divorced?" The direct question caught them off guard. Emily swallowed nervously, and Jake felt his heart clench. "You see," he said softly, "your mother and I have decided to live separately. It will be better for us. Yes, we are going to get a divorce. But that doesn't mean that one of us will disappear from your life. Not at all. We just won't be husband and wife anymore," Emily added, wiping away tears. "But we'll always be your mom and dad. That'll never change. We'll both spend time with you, just taking turns now." Ella pressed her lips together and two large tears rolled down her cheeks. "So we won't all live together anymore? I'll be with Dad, then with you." "That's right, my love," Jake nodded, also holding back tears. "You'll get 2 rooms, one in our house, the other in Mom's new apartment. And we've come up with a schedule that's understandable and convenient for you." He picked up a pre-prepared calendar from the table. It had days marked with multicolored markers: blue for the days Ella spent with her dad, pink for her mom. They tried to make sure that neither parent was short-changed on time. According to the schedule, Ella would live alternately for a week with each and every other weekend. "Look, honey," Emily pointed at the calendar with a trembling finger. "Next week, for example, you live with Mom. I take you to school, you do your homework at my place. Then the next week, you live with Dad, and so we alternate. And do you see the hearts on each Sunday? That means that on Sunday, the 3 of us will definitely go somewhere or have lunch together, so that you see both of us at once." Ella looked at the calendar, sobbing. Jake knew it was hard for his daughter to accept all of this. He hugged her again and held her close. "We're so sorry, Ellie," he whispered. "We tried, but it's better this way. Believe me, we'll try to make sure you're not sad. You can always call Mom when you're at mine, and me when you're at Mom's. We'll come to you at your first call." Ella cried a little more, burying her face in her dad's shirt. Emily stroked her daughter's back, quietly repeating words of love. After a while, the girl quietly asked, "Are you sure you won't make up?" "Never." Her parents glanced over her head. Emily bit her lip and said nothing. Jake felt a lump in his throat, but tried to answer honestly. "Most likely not, my dear. It happens. We hurt each other too much. But that doesn't change the fact that we both love you very much." Ella nodded and suddenly hugged first her dad and then her mom very tightly. "I love you too," she sobbed. Jake's eyes filled with tears too, and he covered his daughter and wife with his arms, hugging the 3 of them together. It was the last time the 3 of them would hold each other like this. A few minutes later, Ella, tired of crying, went to her room to digest what she had heard. Emily went to her new apartment. A few minutes later, Emily came downstairs, where a car with her things was already waiting for her at the porch. Jake went out to see her off. They stood next to each other at the trunk, looking at each other hesitantly. Ella had already gone to her room to cry by that time, and only a light evening breeze broke the silence. "Take care," Jake said dully, looking down. "You too," Emily answered just as quietly. She wanted to add something else, but the words got stuck. She extended her hand, and after a short pause, Jake shook it. This handshake became their unspoken farewell as ex-husband and wife. Emily got into the car, looked at the dark windows of the house once more, and drove away. That night, Jake spent his first night alone in the house. The silence was oppressive. He walked through the empty rooms where children's laughter and voices had recently been heard, and felt like a stranger in his own home. Only the wall calendar with the days marked in pink and blue reminded him that this story would continue for Ella's sake, and that meant he had to move on. The days flowed in a new way. Now that Ella was staying with her dad every other week, Jake had to master many skills that he had never thought about before. One of them was doing his daughter's hair in the morning. Before, Emily would usually braid Ella's hair neatly before school, and Jake would just hurry the girls so as not to be late. Now it was up to him to do it. On one of the first mornings of the new routine, Jake stood in the bathroom with a comb in his hand, looking at his daughter's light brown hair falling on her shoulders. Ella sat on a stool, watching her father's manipulations in the mirror with interest. Jake carefully divided the hair into 3 strands. So, then this one to the left, or to the right, he muttered under his breath, trying to remember yesterday's lesson from the YouTube video. Dad, that's not it, Ella giggled. You've let my left strand grow completely. Ouch! Jake quickly grabbed the slipping lock of hair. Okay, let's start over. He combed his hair again and started again, the tip of his tongue sticking out in concentration. Ella kept giving advice, turning her head this way and that. Now that strand on top, yes, no, pass it underneath. Aha, like that. Dad, you can do it. After a couple of minutes, the braid was finally ready, slightly crooked, tied with a bright elastic band with a flower. Ella shook her head contentedly, admiring the result. Excellent, she declared. Almost like Mom's. Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead as if he had done a hard job. Phew. A couple more training sessions and I'll become a master of braids. Ella laughed loudly and unexpectedly hugged her dad. Thanks for trying. You're the best dad. These words touched Jake. He kissed his daughter on the top of her head. And you are the best daughter. That's it, champion. Run to breakfast or we'll be late. Ella's favorite cereal with milk and a sliced banana were already waiting for her in the kitchen. Jake had set the table in advance. While his daughter was wolfing down her breakfast, he checked her backpack. Were all her textbooks taken? Was the lunchbox packed? This was something he had to learn too before. Emily was more often the one who supervised his daughter's preparations for school. Now, Jake entered a list on the refrigerator and checked all the items together with Ella in the mornings. It turned into a game. The girl happily put check marks with a marker next to notebooks, pencil case, and sports uniform. Another new task was shopping for clothes and things for Ella. Emily used to do this, but one day, when his daughter needed new sneakers and a dress for a school party, Jake took her to the mall himself. He felt out of place among the display cases with girls' outfits, but Ella enthusiastically showed him the things she liked. In the end, after consulting with his daughter and the saleswoman, Jake chose a beautiful blue dress and comfortable bright sneakers for Ella. Ella was delighted, and Jake felt quiet pride, having coped with another parental mission. In the evenings, when they were alone, the house didn't seem so empty. Jake and Ella filled it with a new kind of noise. They cooked dinner together, simple dishes like macaroni and cheese or omelets, sometimes having pancake breakfasts for dinner just for fun. Once, while trying to bake cookies according to their mother's recipe, they mixed up the salt and sugar and laughed together as they tried the inedible creation. They had to order pizza, and sitting on the living room floor, they had a picnic watching their favorite cartoon. Every night before bed, Jake would come to his daughter to say goodnight. Ella had arranged her room the same way she had before. Plush toys on the pillows, a night light with a picture of stars on the ceiling. The only difference was that her mother was not there. At first, Ella would ask before bed, "Will Mom not read me a fairy tale today?" Jake's heart sank each time. He replied softly, "Mom reads on the days when you're with her. And today I'll read. Which one will we read? About dragons or about princesses?" And so they did. On Daddy's days, Jake read chapters of fairy tales aloud, something he'd rarely done before. At first, he felt awkward, mixing up the characters' voices, but Ella would correct him with a smile and ask him to continue. On Mommy's days, they would video call, and Emily would read the story from the phone screen. Ella would fall asleep knowing that both her parents were with her, albeit in turns. He and Emily gradually adjusted their holiday schedules. Their first Christmas apart was tough. Ella spent the night with her mother, and Jake spent the evening alone for the first time, joining her the next day to go to the town Christmas party with his daughter. It was unusual, but they managed. Later, their parents agreed to alternate holidays. For example, Ella would spend Thanksgiving with her dad and Christmas with her mom, and vice versa the following year. Ella knew that she would see both parents and get double the love, and she gradually got used to the new routine. Everyday life was settling down. Jake learned to braid hair and iron school uniforms, plan menus, and choose gifts for Ella's friends' birthdays. Time spent with his daughter became a joy and a meaning for him. Although at night, when he was alone, he sometimes still felt loneliness and pain as soon as he remembered his past life. During the day, there was no time for melancholy. Ella demanded attention and gave so much love that he did not need anything else now. Several months passed. Spring had come, but that day the weather was reminiscent of autumn. A cool wind was blowing. Gray clouds were racing across the sky. Jake and Ella were working in the yard near the house, collecting old, damp leaves that had spent the winter under the snow into bags. Ella helped as best she could, laughing as the wind snatched the light leaves from their rakes and swirled them through the air. "Oh, that naughty wind," Jake exclaimed, adjusting the collar of his jacket. "As soon as you get it together, it starts blowing again." Ella sniffed. "Dad, why is it so windy in spring? It's not autumn." "It happens in the spring too," Jake shrugged, shaking another batch of leaves into the bag. "The wind is always blowing and takes away whatever it wants." The girl looked thoughtfully at how far a lonely maple leaf flew down the street. "Does he take everything?" she asked quietly. Jake sensed more than just an interest in the weather in her voice. He put down his rake and crouched down next to his daughter. "What are you talking about, darling? What's bothering you?" Ella looked down, fiddling with the edge of her mitten. "You and Mom are also like those leaves. We were all together, and then the wind blew us all in different directions. I just—" She sobbed, "I miss you sometimes. I want us to be together again. It's stupid, right?" Jake's heart sank. He put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, holding her close. "No, it's not stupid, Ellie. It's normal to miss what was. I miss it sometimes, too." "Really?" The girl looked up at him in surprise. "Are you sad, too?" "Of course, honey," Jake nodded. "Adults just hide it better. But I often think about the three of us going on vacation together, or decorating the Christmas tree together. I wish it could be like that again, too." Ella wrapped her arms around her dad's neck and buried her face in his shoulder. "Why did this happen, Dad? Did you and Mom fall out of love with each other?" Jake froze. This was the question he had been dreading. He patted his daughter's back, considering his answer. We stopped being good husband and wife for each other. Mom did something, I made mistakes too. Sometimes it happens. Love doesn't disappear completely, but people can't live together anymore." Ella pulled back a little and looked into his face. "Are you and your mother friends now?" Jake smiled sadly. "Not really, but we're trying to be friendly for your sake. And maybe in time we can become something like friends. It's just that Dad needs a little more time to stop being angry." "On Mom?" the girl asked. "Yeah," Jake sighed. "I'm not as angry as I used to be, but I still get angry sometimes when I think about it. But that's none of your business. This is an adult thing. The main thing is that we both love you." Ella nodded and wiped her nose with her gloved hand. "I know. It's just, what if someday you fall in love again?" Jake stroked his daughter's head, straightening a strand of hair that had fallen out of her braid. "I don't think we can be together as husband and wife anymore, honey. But we will always be united in one thing in our love for you. You are our best child in the world, and for your sake, we will continue to try to get along. Are you feeling bad now with Mom or with me? You spend time with us in turns, we try to make you happy." The girl shrugged. "It's good with you. It's just a pity that we're not together. But I understand. After all, you don't argue and shout like Becky's parents in class. They fight all the time. But you don't do that, and that makes me feel better." Jake looked warmly at his daughter, marveling at her wisdom. "We try very hard, darling. We want you to have a childhood without scandals. Sorry that it didn't turn out like a fairy tale," he smiled sadly. Ella hugged him tighter. "I love you, Dad." The wind rustled in the treetops, blowing away the last of the autumn debris. But Jake, holding his daughter in his arms, knew that the most important thing had not disappeared. Their bond remained strong. He kissed Ella on the cheek. "And I love you too, baby. Very, very much." They stood there for a moment, watching the air currents rush along the road, raising dust and leaves. Much had changed in their lives, much had to be let go. But there was still a whole world ahead of them, maybe not the same as before, but their own new one. Jake knew they could cope. A year and a half passed. On a warm summer day, Jake brought Ella to Lake Holness, the same place where one of the hardest days of his life had happened. Now this place had acquired a new meaning for him. He and his daughter often came here to fish or just walk along the shore. Jake bought a small rowboat, and Ella loved to ride it, trying to steer the oars herself. The sun was shining at its zenith. A light breeze rippled the water. Jake helped Ella out onto the old pier, taking her hand. The girl happily hugged the fish she had caught that day to her chest, a small bass splashed in a bucket. "Mom will be happy," said Ella. "We invited her to dinner. She loves fresh fish." "That's right," Jake smiled. "It's going to be a fish feast." They walked to the edge of the dock and sat down, dangling their legs. The boat rocked on a rope tied to it nearby. Ella closed her eyes, turning her face to the sun. "I love it here. It's so quiet and beautiful. It's like this is our place, right, Dad?" Jake put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Our pier," he confirmed softly. "Ours with you." He looked around. It was quiet. Life had gotten better since their divorce had been finalized last winter. In January of this year, he and Emily had walked into the local courtroom together to hear the judge's decision to end their marriage. Emily was quietly crying. Jake stood next to him, trying not to show his emotions. As they left the courtroom, they had just exchanged confused glances. That was it. Emily had said through her tears, "Forgive me again," and Jake had just nodded, at a loss for words. However, after that, they had both felt a strange relief. The worst was over. As the months passed, the pain gradually dulled. He and Emily had learned to communicate evenly, without the old bitterness. They had gone to parent-teacher conferences together, celebrated Ella's 10th birthday together in the spring, not as a family, but as partners in raising her. Emily had even introduced him to her new friend. It turned out that Jake had not felt jealousy, only quiet joy for her. Jake himself hadn't thought about a new relationship yet. He had enough things to do and worries about. "Dad," Ella's voice brought him out of his reverie, "are you happy?" Jake looked at his daughter, her serious brown eyes peering into his. He smiled, feeling peace spreading inside him. "Now, yes, I have you. I have peace. Perhaps that is happiness." Ella thought for a moment and nodded. "And I'm happy. I have you and my mom, and you don't fight. It's better this way than when things are bad together. You're wise beyond your years," Jake sighed, lightly touching the tip of her nose with his finger. Ella giggled. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water lap gently against the pilings of the dock. Jake felt a deep gratitude for this moment. He had been through a storm, but he had managed to keep the most important thing. The most precious person to him was next to him, his daughter, healthy, smiling, loved. New days awaited them, ordinary, calm, and therefore so valuable. "Shall we go home?" he asked quietly. "Otherwise, Mom must be waiting for us already." "Let's go." Ella jumped up, carefully picking up the bucket with the fish. "Do you think Mom will let us keep it in the aquarium as a pet?" "Although we were going to eat it," the girl giggled. Jake laughed and stood up, slightly stretching his numb legs. "We'll see. Maybe you can convince Mom to let me live. I wouldn't be against getting a fish." They walked back to the car, holding hands. The old wooden dock was left behind, a quiet, peaceful place for them. Everything was new in the life of this small family, but they had coped. And although there would undoubtedly be difficulties ahead, Jake was sure of one thing. Together, albeit in a new format, they would definitely cope with them. At the beginning of the new school year, Miss Martinez gave the class an assignment to prepare a short story about a place where you feel calm. You could bring a drawing, a photo, or a small craft. Ella sat for a long time over a blank sheet of paper, twirling a blue marker in her hands. "What are you going to talk about?" Jake asked, looking into her room. "Our pier," she answered confidently. "The one on Wholeness. Can we go there on Saturday to take a photo?" They set off. The water was smooth and the dock planks were warm from the sun. Ella squinted, holding a white piece of cardboard and a pencil, making quick sketches. Jake stood nearby and did his best to stay out of the way. "Dad, can I ask Mom what she thinks of this place?" Ella suddenly said. "I want both of you to be in the project." "Sure," Jake nodded. "Write to her. We'll arrange to call each other in the evening." That evening, the three of them met at Emily's, where the kitchen smelled of vanilla cookies, which Ella loved. Emily pulled out an old framed photo from the closet, she and Jake on the same dock, many years ago, happy and sunburned. "I was always afraid of dropping my phone in the water," Emily smiled, handing the frame to her daughter. "And Dad said, if you drop it, we'll both dive in," and I felt calm. Ella carefully turned the frame towards the light. "Can I add this story to the project?" she asked. "Yes," Jake said. He caught Emily's gaze, and for the first time in a long time, he saw not guilt or weariness, but simple, warm gratitude. He nodded, barely, but enough. Ella spent the next few days collecting material. She wrote down by hand, "Our pier is a place where the wind is not scary." She drew a small boat, knitted a miniature rope from threads. She asked her parents for one phrase each for the ending. "Just be honest, but not sad, okay?" she warned. Jake thought for a long time and wrote, "I am happy when I see Ella's eyes light up." Emily added, "Love is not gone, it has become a care in two houses." Ella pasted these phrases on cardboard next to photographs. On the left, an old one from a frame, on the right, a recent one of her, and her dad sitting on the edge of the dock, dangling their legs over the water. The day of the presentation was approaching. In the classroom, Miss Martinez had set up tables along the wall. Children brought either beacons made of Play-Doh or printed photographs. Jake arrived a little earlier and sat in the back row. A minute later, Emily came in. They exchanged a quick hello and sat down at a distance on one bench, as they had long been accustomed to next to each other, but without unnecessary gestures. When it was Ella's turn, she stood up, clutching the cardboard to her chest. "The place where I feel safe is our dock on Lake Holmes," she began, looking around for her parents for a second. She saw them both and smiled. "We used to go there together, the three of us. Now we take turns, but the dock is still ours, because it remembers old stories and new ones." She showed photos, told about the rope that she tied herself so that the boat wouldn't float away, and about the fish that they finally released into the water one day because it looked like a pet. The children laughed. In the end, Ella read two phrases from the parents. "And also," she added after a pause, "I have two houses. I used to think that was bad. But now I understand there is no less love, there are just two of them. Sometimes I miss the way it was, but on the pier I always feel that we are still a family, just in a new way." The room went quiet. Miss Martinez smiled and clapped first. The kids cheered loudly, as only third graders can. Ella bowed and returned to her seat, beaming. After the lesson, both parents came up to her in turn. Emily sat down and straightened a strand of hair that had fallen out of her daughter's hair. "You were amazing," she said. "Very brave and very kind." Jake shoved his hands into his pockets to hide the sudden tremor and just exhaled. "I'm proud of you, champion." Ella looked around and unexpectedly handed them each a small paper ticket drawn with a felt tip pen. "These are passes to the pier," she explained. "One for Mom, one for Dad, so you can always come, together or in turns as it happens." They took the passes. Jake read aloud mechanically, "Always valid." "Not bad conditions," he chuckled. "No limits," Emily played along. The three of them went out into the schoolyard. It was sunny and a little windy. Ella ran to her friends, promising that she would be right back. Emily and Jake remained on the porch in silence, which this time did not cut to the quick. "Thank you for coming," Emily said first. Thank you too, Jake replied, for the line about caring. That's right. She nodded. They stood there for a few seconds, watching Ella jump up and down and show her pass to her classmate. Then Emily added carefully, she has softball practice again on Saturday. New coach, seems good. Want to come along? We'll sit on opposite sides of the field like usual, and then we can. Well, if you want, go to Wholeness. For half an hour. Ella said she wanted to double-check the rope. Jake smiled at the corner of his lips. Agreed. Let's check. He looked at the paper pass in his palm. The simple child's piece of paper suddenly felt like something important, like a bridge that the three of them had built across everything that had happened to them. A bridge that they could walk on carefully, slowly, but still walk. Ella returned, grabbed their hands, as usual each palm in hers, and the three of them went to the parking lot, not to their previous life and not to some completely different one, but to the one they had already managed to build with a pier that always works. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.